Before we begin here, I would like to acknowledge some of the people that have, specifically the person who is putting this together, Hans Botsman, his love. And in fact, instead of just clapping, it's much more than that. I mean, he is a representative. We've got this cutting off and on. He is a representative from the Mayan people who is bringing out again something that has been lost for a very long time. I'd like to ask you to do something that is very simple, but if you would just open your heart to him, and we'll, for just about 30 seconds, while you have your heart open with this love, to chant the very simple chant of Hu. It's a Sufi sound that opens the heart, and just to bring that through to him, and through him to all the Mayans that are alive, and through them to all the Mayans that are living on the other dimensional levels, which we'll talk about in just a little bit, because they're not gone. They're still here. So I'll start the chant, and just for a moment, but open your heart. Thank you, Hans Botsman. Thank you. There were also 3 Tibetan lamas that were here this morning. I think most of you were here. I didn't know until this morning that their teacher was Kalu Rinpoche. Kalu Rinpoche is one of my teachers, and he's one of my most beloved teachers. Of all the Tibetans that I've ever worked with, he shows more love than anyone I've ever seen in my life. And it is great joy to find out that he's alive again, and as a little boy in a body again. That's it's extraordinary. I'd also, before we begin, starting here, I want to acknowledge you. Some of you may not even realize that your own importance. You're here not just by an accident. You're here because of the work that you've done in your lives to get here. Many of you have been working for years and years, and many of you all your lives, to come to this certain place of this initiation. And all of us need to acknowledge each other. It is very important. So if just for one moment you just put your hand on your heart and acknowledge yourself and all those that are here, there is something very important about this meeting. This talk is about the responsibility that you all hold now that you have got to this place in life. You would kind of think, because of the sacred geometry you saw in there, that I would be speaking about sacred geometry, or perhaps the Merkaba or the sacred breath or something along those lines. But I'm not, because I think that there's something more important here. And it's the responsibility that you have toward others that are just a little bit farther down below you, or perhaps sound asleep and don't have any idea what's going on. But it's you have a responsibility, and a really big and a very important one. In order to describe that responsibility a little bit more, I'm going to have to go back in time. I need to go back quite a ways, not millions and millions of years, but a couple 100,000 years ago. We began a little over 200,000 years ago. You must realize when I give dates and times, this is my opinion and these are my teachers. You may hold a different time structure or feeling. It's okay. It's not really that important how long back it is. But we began sometime in the past. And we began in a very particular way that is different than we are now. We began in absolute unity. We didn't need books. We didn't need writing. We didn't need anything because we were like cells in our body. There was just oneness that moved through all of us. We were very different. But about 16,000 years ago, something happened on a little place called Atlantis. And we misused our power and who we were. Many of you know exactly what I'm talking about. And we're still struggling to overcome this misuse of what we did at that time. A little bit shorter time from then, just under 13,000 years ago, the poles shifted on this planet, and the consciousness shifted dramatically to a different way of interpreting the reality. There's only one reality. There's lots of ways to interpret it. We ended up in a position where we believe that we are inside of a physical body looking out, and that we're inside here, and that what's out there is somehow not us. It's separate from us. That has remained now for some time, up until this moment. The ascended masters and the people that were of... Here we're cutting out again. The ascended masters did everything they could to correct the situation. And finally, they decided to do something that is seldom done, and that was they were going to reconstruct the grids that were around the Earth that hold the levels of consciousness that we used to be on, and to reconstruct these grids, alchemically, synthetically, not naturally. And those grids took 13,000 years just about to be completed, and they're done now. They were done, physically completed, on February 4th, 1989. Without those grids, we can't move to the next level of consciousness or begin to return to the place where we used to be. There was a great deal of fine-tuning that had to be done. And probably many of you in this room found yourself running all around the world, especially from about 1985 up to about 1992, running around saying, well, I got to put this crystal in Chichen Itza or Uxmal or the Great Pyramid or somewhere, and you just couldn't help it, but you had to go spend $10,000 to go do this. And there were hundreds of thousands of people all over the world doing this because their inner guidance, Mother Earth, the one spirit that we all are one with, was leading you to do this. And it was really important that you did that, because if you didn't place that one crystal where you did, we would be not where we are in this room right now. It would be different. It was really important, and I thank you for that. Mother Earth thanks you for that. After 1992, another phenomena began to take place, which has never occurred in this way anywhere in the universe before. Usually critical mass happens long before this, where enough people begin to move into unity consciousness, or Christ consciousness, if you will. And the whole planet goes into that. But it didn't happen that way. But in 1992, over half of the world, in their hearts, made a tremendous change. They just didn't want to do this anymore. In their hearts, they just said, "No, I don't want to live this way with this technology and this way and this pain and these wars and this suffering." They didn't make an outward change, but they made an inward change in here, and it was registered in the grids. And for the first time, the forces of light became stronger than the forces of darkness. And this reversed patterns. Usually when it's the nature of darkness to bring chaos. It's supposed to. That's what it's supposed to do. And when it does that, it I don't know exactly how to say this, but it causes Jesus said this, where he said to resist not evil, because when you do, you actually lend power to that which you're trying to resist. But that phenomena has been reversed. And now when the dark side tries to resist the light, which is its nature, it actually makes the light stronger. And we've been in this position since 1992, which has caused the consciousness to accelerate even faster. It's all natural. It's all part of what's going on. The Mayans, which play, from my point of view, a very pivotal and important role in the unfolding of consciousness on this earth to get us back to where we were before, have adapted a particular sequence of events in order to do this. When Atlantis went down, the Mayans came here to the Yucatan. The Mayans then, from my belief, were primarily the priesthood of Atlantis, of a very specific area of priesthood connected back through Lemuria. They remembered and had the knowledge of the Merkaba and the living breath. This is documented in the world today because of a document called the Toronto document. The Toronto document is held in the British Museum right now, which is a series of stones that was interpreted by Le Plongeon of France, which showed the sinking of the continent of Atlantis. It talks about it in great detail. It shows all the pyramids and the volcanoes going off and how it sank and how it went through 3.5 days of darkness and then came back out the other side. And for that reason, they remembered. They knew. And very, very, very few people remembered. The only other people that remembered in this world that have any real knowledge of that were the Tibetan Buddhists. And I find it very interesting that the two of them happen to be here. They also remember. Most of the other beings of the world only have partial memories. The American Indians have a little bit of it. They all have little pieces and little bits and pieces, but they don't really remember. The Mayans, with their calendar and their ability to perceive the events very accurately into the future, knew the sequences that were about to happen a few hundred years ago. And they elected to step out of directly the pathway of this onslaught of darkness that was coming on. And so approximately 100 years before the Spanish came here, most of the Mayans disappeared. Literally. They took a breath that led them into another dimensional world. I say this because I received this information directly from Khan Ka, who was the architect of the Chichen Itza pyramid and also of the Palenque, primary pyramid at Palenque. And they're still there, they're alive. But they exist on another level of the world's dimensions so that they can function from there in a clearer and better way. Though unlike other tribes like the Anasazis who left completely and did the same thing, exactly the same thing. And they're still alive too. I've connected with them. They're still there. But, and they're functioning with an almost identical purpose, but in a different way. The Mayans also left a living trace on the third dimensional world. They're still here. They're still alive. They're primarily have been hidden and living in the old ways, not connected to technology. But now we have something very beautiful starting to occur. Finally. Finally something starting to come out of this in a really good way. Back about, 95, about 45 years ago, Father Sun began to emit a light that our scientists had never seen before, ever. It was a green spiral of energy that was coming off the Earth. It was recorded by David Suzuki in Canada, the first one. And that green spiral of energy began to pulse stronger every 3 years. From 1950, 53, 56, 59, the pulse getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And we, you in this room, me, and other people that you know are close to you, have begun to wake up. You begin to realize that there's more to life than what our mothers and fathers had told us, because they didn't know. They were asleep. And slowly we began to understand more and more and more what this word spirituality or enlightenment was really, what it really was, what it really meant. The word ascension began to become stronger, and the concepts and ideas of being able to move into other dimensions, taking your body with you, and your memories and your consciousness with you, began to become not only just interesting, but people began to actually experience these levels. And I'm sure many of you here know what I'm talking about. What it is equivalent to is, on a more natural way of talking about it, is that Mother Earth, the consciousness of the whole Earth, fell from a long, long, long time ago. And there was a separation between Mother Earth and Father Sun, a disconnection temporarily. And we are nothing but the eyes and the ears and the sensing device of Mother Earth. You know, all the plants and all the life and everything, the trees, it's all alive. The stone's alive. This podium is alive. Everything's alive. Everything has spirit. Great Spirit is everywhere. There is nowhere. And because of the love that we all have in this room, and there is tremendous love here, it's tremendous. Because of this love that you have, Mother Earth is waking up. And we are in the process of this year right now, are experiencing the rising of a spiritual sun. Father Sun is in the process right now of breaking over the horizon. And we are just like people. You can imagine, for example, an ordinary sunrise, a sunrise coming up, and there's people laying all over the ground, asleep. Millions of people everywhere. And a few people woke up a little early. You know, they woke up maybe a half an hour before the sunrise. And they're starting to stretch a little bit and kind of remembering what it was about. Hey, do you remember when we could fly and do all kinds of... Yeah, I remember that. And these dim memories begin to come back. But most of the people in the world are still laying there asleep. They don't remember. so, over the last 45 years, the sun is still getting closer and closer to that time when it hits the horizon. And we're waking up more and more and more, and it's getting brighter and brighter out there. But yesterday, I'm sure you felt it. The actual rays of the sun are striking the surface. They're hitting our hearts. What this is going to mean is that people are going to wake up very fast. Millions of people all over the world. And they're not going to quite understand. They're going to be confused a little bit because they won't have the slow unfoldment that you had. And it's your responsibility to be there for them. You are all teachers. Doesn't mean that you have to have some fancy thing to say or anything else. It just means to be there as an example of love so that they can see what it is they are to become and where they're to go. You're all seed crystals, and you're going to affect thousands and thousands of people. And there are other people like you around the world. And many of them have their doubts and their fears because, what we're talking about here is something extraordinary. It's outside of anything that we normally know. It's outside of anything our parents ever told us, or at least more than likely. You might have some extraordinary parents out there. And so you've got to love yourself, stay centered, and remember that God is within you, and there is only one God, Great Spirit, and it moves through all of you and all life everywhere. And just to remain there and to be that example. We witnessed something yesterday at Chichen Itza where I think they estimated 40,000 people showed up. 45,000 it was. It's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. 30 years ago, you'd been lucky if 10 people were there. I was there 10 years ago, and I think it was like about 100. And did you feel what was happening with the people's hearts? I was working with this man who works with MGM, they were working on that movie Stargate. And the movie houses and television people they want to know what's happening all the time, So they have these polls that are taken every 90 days. They spend a fortune just to find out what you're thinking. And and whatever you're thinking, that's what the next movie's going to be about. So they watch that very, very carefully. And usually it's sex and violence and stuff like this. This is where we've been for a long, 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 long time. Maybe Maseratis or something. There was like an overnight change occurred about 9 months ago. The producers I were talking to was going, I don't know, they don't understand it. And it's still there. They categorize it by 10 different subjects. What are the 10 most important things? This is in America, the United States, of course. The 10 most important things that America is thinking of or interested in. And 9 months ago, what came up number one on the list, more important than anything else, even sex and violence, was ancient wisdom. It's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. Just like that. It happened. But it's going to go faster now. It's going to go a lot faster. And you got to be prepared for the speed at which I believe this is going to occur. Your friends, your relatives, people everywhere So, you know how it was a few years ago. You started talking about what you were interested in, and everybody thought you were nuts, right? And they didn't want to talk to you, and you were probably all the black sheep of your family. And you know what I mean. Suddenly, all those same people are going to become interested in what you had to say, and they won't know why. They just will be, because Mother Earth is waking up, because Father Son is shining the light on her, and the connection is being remade because of all the work that we did for so many thousands of years. It wasn't just an accident that these sacred sites, such as Chichen Itza or Uxmal or Palenque or the Great Pyramids or Machu Picchu or Sacsayhuaman or any of these other ones anywhere in the world, it wasn't an accident. They were created by the consciousness of the planet before they were created. They were created on another dimensional level. And each one of them mathematically describes the next one. Even though they were created thousands of years apart and by different cultures over different times, you can erase all that thought and you can look and see how one created the next and the next and the next, and that there was a single consciousness moving through this, not individual cultures. A single oneness that created this, and that was all for the purpose of geomancing the earth in such a way to create this grid that's now sitting about 60 miles around it, above the earth, around the earth, based on the dodecahedron, icosahedral relationships, which is the same energy fields that every one of you have around your body, out about 55 feet out there. We are light, we are love, we are oneness. And that's that's where we're going. We can talk about the directions of what dimension we're going into, or what's going to happen afterwards, where really I don't think very few people really know. And I mean, when I say people, I mean higher consciousness on a lot of levels, because this is so unique what's occurring here. But it is oneness that we're returning into. And so, I could go on with words forever, but it only produces so much of an effect within you. After doing the Flower of Life workshop for 10 years, I realized that there's only one real way to make change, and that's through direct experience. Everything else is just words. It does help. It does lead to that, but direct experience is the way. If you will allow me, I would like to give that to you right now. If this is not appropriate for you and what you believe, then don't participate, and it's okay. You don't have to do this. But if you want to, you can have that experience right now. It's very easy. It's right here in this room, and it's available to every person right now. So if you want to do this, if you just stand up, everybody stand up if you want to, and pair off. Just find one other person. It doesn't make any difference if it's male, female, anything else, because Christ is in the eyes of every person. Just find one person, and I'll give you about a few seconds to do that. There's a prayer that we start the Flower of Life with, the workshop, and it is, though it's a long prayer, it begins by saying, Great Spirit, Mother, Father, Child, God, Creator of all life everywhere, thank you for the love in this room, in this circle. Thank you. Because this love, or without this love, we would never be able to see you in the eyes of every person before us. The Christ and God is in every single person. And so, if you'll just face this person and hold their hands for a moment, and just look into their eyes. And if you have glasses on, you might want to remove them. You don't have to if you don't want to, but you might want to. They're kind of like windshields, you know. Okay. Now look into that person's eyes and look past the personality. Look past the face. Look past everything. Look deep in there. And if you look really deeply, you're going to see the Christ, the unity consciousness that has always been, is now, and always will be. If you take your right hand and place it on the heart of the other person, place it right on their heart, you can not only see the love of the Christ, you can feel it. Just relax. 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 It's the beloved. You're looking at yourself. Okay. Now with all that love you're feeling, just give that person a big hug. It's that easy. Bring that out to the world, and everything's going to be just great. Thank you, everyone. Thank you very much.
We're here in the Maya land with Drunvalo Melchizedek, teacher of Flower of Life workshops. Welcome, Drunvalo.
Thank you.
Can you explain or give us a definition for your last name?
Well, Melchizedek is not a person. I mean, it's not me specifically. It's a consciousness level. And it exists everywhere. There's nowhere where Melchizedek is not. And it's very complex to try to explain really what that means without understanding dimensional levels and a lot of other things. There are 144 basic dimensional levels between each octave of universes. And anyone who passes through all 144 and can remain stable and actually stay there enters into a state called Melchizedek. And when that happens, they have a choice at that point to either stay or to step outside of the entire universe itself. And if they step outside, they return back to God. And if they stay, they basically take a bodhisattva vow, and they remain here, at which point they can no longer help themselves, they can only help others. And on this earth right now, well, when our consciousness began, which was a little over 200,000 years ago, there was a very specific Melchizedek who was assigned to our planet. He's been here now for about 200,207 years, and his name was Machivinda Melchizedek. He was my great-great-great-grandfather. And but because of the circumstances that have arrived on this planet, which are extraordinary, there's really nothing like it anywhere else. The balancing side of life, or the Dark Brotherhood, brought in 4 other aspects of themselves to work here, and that triggered the light side to bring 4 other aspects, and I was one of those. And so there are 5 Melchizedeks here on the planet right now. Now there are many people who have been initiated into the priesthood of Melchizedek, and that's a little different. That's connected with the Great White Brotherhood. Machiavinda Melchizedek set up the first order of the Great White Brotherhood, which is called Alpha and Omega Order of Melchizedek. And since then, there have been 71 other orders that have been created. I'm connected only with the first and the last, Alpha and Omega Order of Melchizedek, and the Brotherhood of the Seven Rays, which is in Peru. That's about all I can say right now.
You teach a class called The Flower of Life. Could you give us an idea of what that encompasses?
Well, the essence of it, it is an ancient form of breathing that is known throughout all life everywhere, and it's called the Merkaba. The information around this breathing and how it works and why it works and what it's all about comes from a symbol. I know you can't see it. I have it around my neck. It's 19 little circles that are all interwoven in a particular little pattern. That symbol you will find all over the world. It's found in ancient Egypt, Tibet, China, England, Scotland, all countries everywhere in all the ancient cultures. They all had the exact same pattern. And it's a pattern that is involved in something called sacred geometry. And this specific pattern, once it's understood, contains everything there is in the reality. There is nothing that you can say on any level whatsoever that isn't completely described in every single aspect there is inside of those 19 circles. Though that seems outrageous and impossible, it's true.
What drew you to come to the Maya land and participate in the Mayan solar initiation journey?
I believe in the transformation that's now occurring on the earth, and much of this transformation is connected to the ancient peoples of the world. Some of these peoples are still here on earth in other dimensional levels. Some of them have actually completely left the earth plane and gone to other places. The Mayans are one of the peoples who are not only still here on other dimensional levels of the earth, but they're here physically also. And they hold a really important message to the world. It's a message different than Egypt or Tibet or anywhere else. And I believe that Hun Batsman is the person that will bring forth these messages, though I think this may take time for this information to fully mature and come out into the world. I feel that this is the beginning, and so I wanted to support him. I wanted to be here and say, yes, I believe in you, I trust in you.
You teach about the worldwide grid. Can you explain how that relates to the sacred site centers?
Well, to understand the worldwide grid, you have to go way back in time. There was a point in our history when something happened to us. I could go into great detail on that. I do in the school itself. It takes about 6 or 7 hours to even begin to try to explain it. But we misused power, in essence. We were at one time, during the time of Atlantis, we were in a pure unity consciousness, very similar to Christ consciousness, but on a higher level than Christ consciousness. We actually had attained an incredible level of awareness. And because of a misuse by a very specific part of ourselves, we fell. And it's the great fall that's talked about in the Bible. We fell. We started falling through, free falling, uncontrollable free fall through the consciousness dimensional levels. And we fell all the way down to this place. This is as low as you can get. This is the bottom of the barrel. This is if you go any lower than this, you're not self-aware. And we went all the way down to the beginning again, and we have to go back up. And so when we did that, the original grids And I guess I need to explain that a little bit. There are electromagnetic geometrical energy fields that surround the Earth. They exist from approximately an average of 60 feet inside of the Earth to approximately 60 miles above the Earth, and they stretch all the way through there. And there was at the beginning of the century about 30 million of them, because there was one for every species on the planet. Every time a new species develops, every time a new bug appears, a new bird appears, before it appeared, the grid had to first appear around the Earth. It had to first be created before even two little bugs could appear. Once it appears, then that consciousness steps into the grid and it continues on. And so the humans actually at this moment have 3 different grids up there. Not 1, but 3. They have the one that we initially stepped into, and there's a whole set of sacred geometry that can be seen around that, which very few people are left in that first grid. The only people left are the Aboriginals in Australia, and there's 2 or 3 tribes in Africa, and other than that, they're the only ones connected to it. And then there's the grid that we're in now, which is based on triangles and squares, and it's the one that the normal consciousness that we're used to is connected to. It's you might say, a lens that you interpret the reality through. And finally, there's a new grid that is up there that we started because of this problem in Atlantis. That grid is now completed. It took 13,000 years for that grid to be completed. And that one's based on the pentagon, and specifically the dodecahedron-icosahedronal relationship. Without those grids, without the Christ grid, if you want to call it that, around the world, we would not be able to go into the solar age. It could not happen. It just simply couldn't exist. And so a long time ago, there were people of great integrity and great intelligence who saw that we were going to fall, and they went to the place where these grids actually have an axis, just like the Earth has an axis. And they went to the axis of the grid that was destroyed when we fell, and they reestablished it. They made a hole into the Earth right over the grid. The hole still exists, it's in Egypt. And from there was a spiraling energy that went out. And there's 2 of them, actually, based on specific mathematics. And both of those spiraling energies pass right through the tips of the 3 pyramids. They discovered this from aerial photographs. And from that, all the rest of the sacred sites of the world, of which there are approximately 83,000 of them, have been constructed. Every single sacred site in the world can be, if you understood the code and how it worked, can be mathematically delineated back to that single place in Egypt.
How do you see that the beginning of the solar age will change, or how will it manifest different than our material age we're living in now?
Well, there will be changes that are so vast that we can only kind of touch upon them. We're going to go from this dimensional level to the very next dimensional level, which is the 4th dimensional level. Things there are real different in a lot of ways. First of all, simple things like the colors are not even the same. Every color that you now know, there's an entirely new spectrum that you've never even knew existed, is there. Form appears in different ways. And so the configuration of how things are molded into shape is extremely different. And if you were to see a 4th dimensional object right here, your mind could hardly be able to handle it, because it would be emitting colors you'd never seen, and it would be in a configuration that your mind couldn't understand. So the very nature of this other world we're about to head into is very different. It's not going to be the same as this. And though we will still be involved in physical form, we will still have bodies, but we will go through extremely rapid morphogenic structural changes and end up looking very different. We'll have a very tall skull, we'll have 2 hearts, there will be many changes that we'll go through, and those changes will happen very quickly over a period that will seem to be about 2 years. And so the very nature of that reality is different. It's not going to be as though we're going to go through a polar shift and then somehow we come out the other side and we're just different. This is really a vast change. And from there, we're going to go into formlessness in the fifth dimension, which there's no words for. We can't even talk about it, really. And though the primary and most important change that I can mention at this time is the nature of the reality itself in terms of how it is connected back to mind and heart and spirit. In this world here, when we think a thought, it takes a while for that thought to manifest in the reality. In other words, we are actually creating our reality at every moment by who we are, what we're thinking, what we're feeling in our actions. But there's a lag time. It's slow, and it's slower for some people and faster for others. And that lag time is such that for many people, they don't realize that they're creating everything that's happening in their lives. In the fourth dimension where we're about to go, that lag time is zero. Whatever you're thinking, whatever you're feeling, happens instantaneously. And that is has both a positive and negative side of it. It is the aspect that normally separates people from staying there, because if you go in there with fears and all kinds of negative feelings and etc., they manifest. And it creates a reality that actually throws you back down into the lower realms. And the only way you can stay in the higher realms is to have a consciousness that is whole and complete and perfect and is harmonious. If you're thinking thoughts of love and truth and beauty and trust and harmony and peace, then that's what manifests. And therefore, you remain there and you stay. So it's a world that we're about to head into that is really different. And the most important part that we can do is the work within our own selves to perfect us and prepare for that. It's character that is really, really important there. It's not what you got or what you own or anything else like that. It's who you are.
The Mayas were really obsessed or really interested in time itself. They were timekeepers, day keepers. A lot of people think that the Tzolk'in, the sacred calendar, is a calendar that goes beyond the third dimension. Can you give us any insights on what time is going to feel like in the future, in the next dimension?
Time is experiential, and every dimensional level has a different experience of that time. Our time in this world is pretty much linear. In fact, everything in this world is based on we call it a polarity consciousness, male, female, etc. But if you look very carefully, it's not two, but three. Everything has threeness to it, not two-ness. There is hot and cold. If you think of polarities, you think of a whole bunch of polarities. You can think of like hot and cold, which has a middle one of warm, or up and down, there's the middle. If you think of male, female, then there's the child. If you think of the sun and the earth, there's the moon. You can keep going and you'll discover that in every single polarity you can think of, there's always three. Our space is also divided into threeness, where there's the X, Y, Z axis of space, and so it's divided into threeness too. And so is time from where we are now. There's the past, the present, and the future. And we experience it in this linear way. But that's only because of the place that we are now in, the consciousness, the good and evil consciousness that we're in now perceives it that way. As we step into the next realm, we will perceive time in totally differently. In the very next realm, it'll become spherical, and all things will be seen at once. And there are, in other words, literally seen both past and present and future being in the moment, at that very moment, and everything happening at once. That's hard for us to see, but we can kind of grasp it. When you go to the fifth dimensional level, the time is so different that we can't even talk about it, because it's totally outside of our ability to conceive of what we're talking about, and it keeps changing as we go up. But the Mayan calendar, I believe, is connected with the third and fourth dimensional levels. If it's connected with higher dimensional levels, I'm not really sure how that is, but it probably is. Because the same way with sacred geometry, you can look at a square or a cube here in the third dimensional level, which is totally rational. When it goes in the fourth dimensional level, it takes on a shape that we can barely understand. But we can, but barely. As it proceeds further, it goes beyond our ability to perceive in the same way that time does too. I can't really tell you because I don't know enough about the calendar to be able to really give that kind of answer that you're looking for. But I do believe that the Mayan calendar is the most accurate calendar that we have in the world right now.
How will modern society change the monetary systems, the social systems, the governmental systems in our world?
Well, this falls into the line of I have to kind of backtrack a little bit here. We're talking about the nature of the change itself. Many people have the idea, people who have been involved in this idea, in this work for a long time, that there is going to be this rapid change, and when we get to the other side of it, we will be in perhaps a heart space where there is love, etc., that is controlling things. But we'll still be more or less in a world like this. And as I've already said, I believe that we're going to something really, really different. And this question really pertains, from my point of view, more to the time preceding and slightly afterwards. In other words, there's going to be, let's take it from another point of view. There are people who feel that if, because of this change that's about to happen, they can dig a hole in the ground, they can put food in the ground, they can get guns in there and everything else like that, and if they can somehow ride it through, they can climb back out and everything will be fine. You've got the Mormons and many, many, many people who are preparing on those levels. A lot of those people don't realize that what they're really preparing for is a short period of time right prior to the change. Not after, but prior to. You see, what happens is, and we've witnessed this on planets everywhere, so we're going by direct experience of what we've seen. A planet gets to this place here, and they start coming to the place where the change happens, and the magnetic field of that planet begins to fluctuate. And when that fluctuation begins to happen, certain parts of them begin to fluctuate also. We are tied to our magnetic field in a way that the scientist part of us is just beginning to understand. Our memory is tied to the magnetic field. Our emotional body is tied to the magnetic field. And if that magnetic field were to collapse totally, our memory is erased, and our emotional body, as it begins to fluctuate, goes crazy. We just go nuts. This you can see in if you look into the records in police departments. You could see that the day before, the day of, and the day after the full moon, there's more murders, rapes, etc., and all these kind of things at that time than any other time during the month. And that's because the full moon causes a little tiny bubble on the magnetic field. And people who come into that period who are a little unstable fall over. Well, you can imagine what would happen if the magnetic field of the whole Earth just starts going like this. And that's what we're about to happen. In fact, science has witnessed that for the last 2,000 years, since the time of Jesus, the magnetic field has begun to start dropping. The last 500 years, it's been dropping dramatically. And for about the last 50 years, it's been doing things that people never thought were even possible. It's actually starting to change and go all over the place. There's periods now where the magnetic field is actually turning off, which they never even knew was possible, for just an instant. And in September of, I think it was 1993, the magnetic field went so crazy that the airports had to realign their guidance system so that they can even land their planes. And then it went out. During that time, if you really wanted to do research, you'd see that people were just going just nuts during that time. There was so much craziness going on. And so I got so far out on here, I forgot where was the original question was back to, state the original question again.
What's going to happen to the social order, etc.?
Okay.
Economy.
When this magnetic field starts going out, people are going to start going crazy. I can promise you this, unless something else happens, which I'll talk about. And that's what normally happens. Normally happens, they all start going crazy, and all the governments and the social systems and all these things, they break down. And you have a period of incredible chaos. That period is usually anywhere from 3 months to 2 years before the actual shift occurs. And so that's what that preparation usually is for. However, in this particular time, something's happening that has never been seen by our consciousness ever. And we have been here always. We have never seen what's occurring here on Earth before, ever. Primarily what we've never seen, it isn't that we haven't seen these changes occur, we have never seen them occur with the speed that they're occurring at. It's the speed that's occurring at that is the most important thing.
Through these changes with the confusion and the memory loss and the emotional body going crazy, what can people do? What can they start doing now to help prepare for that so they don't completely lose it like you say we could if we're not watching ourselves?
This is why the Christ grid was started by the Ascended Masters a long time ago, 13,000 years ago. They knew that we would need this point. And so the grids are there now. And now that the grids are there and they're completed and they're whole and they're in place, people can begin to connect from the old one to the new one. That's done through the heart. It's done through love. It's done through unconditional love for all life. The greatest thing that anyone can do right now is to love one another. There is nothing greater you can do. The more that you truly step into your love, which takes incredible courage to do, because usually when you do that, you get squashed, But the more that you can fearlessly step into that place of love, the stronger you connect to the grid. And the stronger you connect to the grid, and the more that every time one person does that, it makes it easier for other people to do it. And as more people step into that, we begin to take over the dream itself. Like I said before, we create our reality. It's a dream. The dream state and this state are very similar when you understand the nature of the two. And when enough people begin to dream a dream of harmony and love, and that we not go through the violent changes that were predicted, because they were predicted because that's what usually happens. But if we can come together and truly step into that place of love, we don't have to go through this. We can make a transition that is not only not violent, but is incredibly beautiful, and where joy can happen all through the whole thing, and all our hope and love and everything can enter into this. It's up to us, and as any particular person watching this, it's up to you. It's up to that individual person to make that choice.
We're seeing a lot of changes, the banking system's crashing, more revolution, but we're also seeing some really beautiful things, like messages from the stars, I would think, like crop circles. Can you tell us what the crop circles are telling us?
Well, I had the opportunity to go to England and to directly connect in with Merlin there, who I didn't really realize his connection to the crop circles. He sat down with me, this was on an interdimensional meditation communication with him, and explained what was going on there. And what he was saying was something that was completely changed my whole viewpoint of the reality, really. I never realized it. It's very difficult to explain it in such an interview such as this. But in the olden times when the Druids, etc., the beings that were the pagans prior to Jesus, they believed that the earth was alive and a living being and was a female, and that the sun was alive and it was a male. And they had tremendous love for Mother Earth and Father Sun. And they did, their whole religion was based around the plants and the animals and the devas and all the consciousness of these things, very much like the ancient Mayans. It was very, very similar in a lot of ways. And one of the aspects that the Druids were very involved with were the crops, the growing of crops. And so it was this is really hard to explain. I'm going to have to backtrack just a tiny bit here. They saw that when they resurrected, or when they became immortal during that time, they didn't ascend away from heaven as we have the interpretation now, but they ascended toward the center of the earth. And then when Jesus came, he taught a manner that actually is an ascension away from earth. It was the exact opposite of what was taught before. Seldom do people really know that it was the Druids that actually assisted Jesus in helping to bring forth that, because they needed the other side of it. What the crop circles are talking about now, and they are circles that are formed in the ripe crops, because that was the holy place of the ancient Druids, was that they're asking us through these circles, or this is one of the primary things that will be made clear soon, is that for us not only to understand what Jesus had to say about the importance of loving your neighbor and each other, which is all what Jesus said was extremely important and of great importance, but they're asking also that we take on the other side and remember the importance of Mother Earth and Father Sun, and to blend those two together. If you look at the original crop circle that formed, and that most of the crop circles that formed, they're ancient Celtic symbols. Literally, right on there. The very first one was a Celtic symbol. It was discovered by Busty Taylor. And in the beginning, that's what they were. And they were always located next to an ancient site, one of the ancient sites of the Druids. And these circles are formed through the help of, from my interpretation of what he said, primarily through the highest level of consciousness of the earth itself, which is what we call the ascended masters, though they are sometimes ascended or assisted by our space brothers and sisters also. It's a complex subject, and there's really a lot to it, and I just touched a little tiny bit of it.
A lot of people are wondering, when is the transformation going to take place? Can you give us a clue?
Well, we are deep inside of that transformation right now. The transformation really began thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago, and it's been proceeding and accelerating ever since. There has been a major shift around 1912 in our consciousness at that time, and then again in 1950, when the sun began to spiral with energies that our scientists had never seen before, and Father Sun began to reconnect with Mother Earth in a new but ancient way. And every 10 years since then, we have been moving through faster and faster and faster changes. You can just look at the information level of what's going on. Scientists have discovered that in about 1900, we had so many bits of information from the time of Sumeria, which is the first culture, up to 1900, about 6,000 years. We had so much information. Well, from 1900 to 1950, that amount of information doubled. We learned as much in 50 years as we did in 6,000. And then it doubled again from 1950 to 1970. These are approximate dates. The whole thing doubled again. It then doubled again from 1970 to about 1980. It then doubled again from about 1980 to about 1985. It's now moving so fast that the computers at NASA and places like this can't even get the information into the computers. It's just coming at us at this extreme rate. We are in the middle of an amazing change. Now, in terms of when is this moment when, and we actually step to the other side, no one knows that. No one. If anyone says they know that, I would doubt it, because this is what Jesus said, no one knows when I will come. I will come like a thief in the night. It's only God knows, or only Mother Earth knows. She knows when she is going to make the change. We are the eyes and the ears and the sensing of Mother Earth. But we cannot say for sure. But there are certain things, such as in the Mayan calendar, when the end of the calendar ends in 2012, you can pretty much bet we don't have much time beyond that. There have been many predictions as to the time, such as Edgar Cayce, who says the shifting of the poles, which will coincide with this shift, more than likely, was in 1998. I have another viewpoint in all of this, and that is, I would suggest that you not be too concerned about when it's going to occur, because if you're thinking into the future, and if part of you is thinking into the future, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming, and we've got to prepare, then you're not in the present. You're not in this moment. And it's only here, right now, this moment. This is the only time we really have. We don't have a future. We don't have a past. We've only got now. And now is the only time that we can make the change within ourselves. And so we can realize it's coming, but just stay centered right here, right now, and just begin to prepare step by step and not be too worried about when this is going to occur.
So what can people do to help speed up their process? I understand that maybe we need to work on our inner negativity and start working on more positive aspects of ourselves to assist with humanity. Do you have other clues or suggestions on what people can do to help speed up the process?
Well, in the school that we have, the Flower of Life School, we do give very specific teachings that can help that, but most of humanity will not have access to that directly right now. But to someone who is just watching this film and is wanting to know from just a very personal level, there's both an inner and an outer way. The inner way is to begin to correct the negativities, and many of which you don't know. In other words, the most important part is to work on the emotional body, because that's where most of our disturbances are, and to find help and to begin to release these blocks and energies that are inside of us so that we can become clear. And there are many systems out there right now that are extraordinary, that can process many of these problems that we have very quickly. Instead of 20, 30 years, they can go very, very fast now. But to work on an inner level. But once you get to this place where your heart begins to open and everything else, to turn it around and begin to practice it and make it real and live it and breathe it. When you walk through a checkout stand and you're sitting there, you could be sitting there somewhere else, again, in the past or future, somewhere else, thinking about somewhere else, or you could be centered right there in the moment and looking at the person and giving them love, both in your feelings and your thoughts. And that changes that person, and it makes you stronger. And that act of actually doing and giving love in the moment prepares you for the change. I don't know of any greater way to do that than that.